Hi, I'm Greg.
And I'm Leanne.
Welcome to the Empowered Poly Podcast, where we give you the tools to help you feel more empowered
in your polyamorous and consensually non-monogamous relationships
by sharing what we've learned as relationship coaches and as individuals.
Empowered Poly is LGBTQ2IA+, alternative lifestyle, and kink-friendly.
Thank you for joining us,
and enjoy the show. Hi, and welcome to episode 23, Grieving Monogamy. So, grieving monogamy can happen to anybody in a polyamorous relationship when transitioning out of monogamy, and it can happen for the person who's choosing monogamy and staying in a polyamorous relationship, or the person who is choosing or identifying as polyamorous and coming out to their partner. Mm-hmm. For both people, it can be kind of a challenging time, and often we don't talk about this part of the process. So that's what today is about, and we're going to cover the points that a lot of people experience or that we've experienced ourselves when grieving monogamy, and then maybe some self-care ideas at the end. All right, so Greg.
Mm-hmm. Hi.
Tell me about what it was like for you when you transitioned out of monogamy into polyamory and what you grieved.
Yeah, that was 16, 17 years ago now. And I think that the biggest thing that I grieved was this idea or perceived idea of security and safety. Because I think monogamy offered me that sort of kind of blinders on approach to relationships, right? And I say perceived or assumed because, frankly, there is no such thing as security and safety in any relationship or connection. Yeah. But the perceived idea that I'm safer in a monogamous relationship, or I'm more secure with myself in a monogamous relationship. Turns out I wasn't. Even more secure with myself. I was actually less secure with myself. I find myself way more secure with who I am as an individual now that, since I've been on my poly journey. And it doesn't mean it's been easy, but it does mean that there's definitely an element of security there for me that wasn't there before. So I had to grieve.
Sorry, you're saying that poly was more secure for you?
Yeah.
Okay. But you thought you were more secure as a monogamous person, or
yes,
you had that sense of safety. Okay.
That perception of safety, right?
Yeah.
Because that was the programming, right?
Yeah.
And so, I thought I didn't have to deal with things like jealousy or fights because we were solid. But turns out the relationships I was in, they weren't solid. And I still had issues of jealousy. I still had issues of insecurity, like massive amounts of insecurity. I just wasn't aware of them, or I wasn't used to sort of moving the furniture around enough to be able to see them for what they were. And so I was grieving that process, or what I thought were those perceptions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How about you?
Same kind of thing, but in maybe a more, there's two elements for me. There's a physical element. So most recently, when we had a period of monogamy, you and I, and when we transitioned back to polyamory from monogamy, I had to kind of let go of what I had felt kept me secure and safe. Some of that was physical. I've always been comfortable talking about STIs and sexual health, and that's why I do what I do. And I'm a sex coach as well as a relationship coach. But the STIs are still concerning, even though they're treatable. And so I have been mindful of that throughout the majority of my sexual life, certainly since I've been in relationships long term. And so stepping out of that, and I've had 2 long-term monogamous marriages, right? I got very used to that idea of exclusivity in that physical sense, being a safety net for my physical self, right? I'm not going to be exposed to anything that I don't want, right? And when COVID happened, that went through the roof for me. So it was a challenge navigating dating through COVID. You in particular dating through COVID took me a while to catch up, but I was actually a monogamous partner to you for some of that time. And I did feel like I was at risk. And then there's the emotional component that you were talking about on top of that. And we know statistically that monogamy does not offer security in a society where we have a 50 or 40% divorce rate. So, it's true that we don't actually have security and that people are unfaithful. I was unfaithful. You were unfaithful, while we were in these monogamous relationships. And so what is there really a security?
Yeah, which actually leads to the next point is the exclusivity idea.
Right. Yes.
Grieving the idea that we as individuals are the only source of intimacy for our partners.
Right? Well, all kinds of intimacy.
Right. Yeah. All kinds of intimacy, right? Like you've mentioned this several times, and I know that I struggle with this even now, even though I want to circle back just for a second to the idea, what I said earlier about being more secure in a poly relationship as opposed to a mono relationship. That realization is relatively new for me. And the reason I say that is because I feel more authentic this way.
Right.
I feel more empowered in my connections and my relationships now that I understand that I am non-monogamous in my core, in my being, in my essence, right?
Yeah.
And up until recently, I had always kind of struggled, and I still do, but it's not always there anymore. But I still struggle with that idea of the mononormative programming. And there's little tiny deaths that happen, right? And I'm grieving those little tiny deaths along the way. Most of those for me are emotional.
Yeah.
Right. And I wonder if that's somewhat gender specific too, because I don't think about the risks, the physical risks, as much as, say, somebody who identifies as female would, right? Just from a purely sort of safety standpoint, right?
Going out
on dates and stuff like that, right? So there's an element of physical safety, not just the STI related stuff, but the element of physical protection that monogamy can provide to those that feel the need for that, right? And so I think that's really important too, to understand that poly or non-monogamy opens that up, because you're now engaging in relationships with people that are very different than the ones that you would have engaged in monogamously, right?
I'm just going to speak to that for a second, because that's a really good point. The physical safety is one element that women or femme presenting people really have to address, right? Where are we meeting? Am I choosing the location? Am I using my own vehicle? Do I have a person who knows where I am on the planet? That I can check in with periodically. I do all of that. And then, following up from that, what is my intention going in? Do I intend to go to a different location with them or not? Having those boundaries be clear up front, not being kind of wishy-washy with yourself about them either. Even if you're super attracted to somebody, maybe the first time you meet them isn't the time to put yourself into a secondary location with them, because, we're trying to gather information as quickly as possible, as efficiently as possible when we're first dating as femme presenting people, to know how safe we are physically. Men think about, I'm going to be rejected on this date, and that's the worst thing that can happen. Women think about, I could be killed on this date, and that's the worst thing that can happen, right? Or sexually assaulted. And it's such a completely different experience, right? And just to be clear, I put in those safety measures with the check-in every hour texting kind of thing for myself. It wasn't something that any partner asked me to do. It was something that I wanted, because I have been sexually assaulted on dates and first dates and in a public place. And so, I mean, the second assault was on a second date. I make different choices now. I make much more informed choices now. And when people come online and they're asking advice and I'm giving it to them, and they're asking things like, how long should you wait before you do have to trust your instincts. You do have to trust your gut. And sometimes you'll get it right. Unfortunately, we can't always know. So it's always a roll of the dice. And when you said that just now, it brought up a lot of stuff for me, because I am a survivor. And I do feel there was a huge comfort in knowing I never had to do that again. So moving into polyamory felt like a roll of the dice with my life on a regular basis, right? Not only that, but things happened online where I was stalked or harassed or threatened. So, typically that's not happening to men, and they don't really get that experience, right?
Yeah, there's a very, I mean, I can't speak for all men, but I can speak for myself, and at least the stories of the men that I've heard, in that there is a very different sense to that in terms of what we see as safety issues and what femme presenting people see as safety issues.
Sure.
Too. The other thing too that I want to acknowledge is that anybody who's listening you might be masculine presenting, and you also might be somewhere else on the sexual spectrum, the sexuality spectrum, that's not hetero. And so those people, in my experience as well, or like at least not my personal experience, but in the experiences I've heard, have also had to be
mindful and careful and vigilant,
more vigilant about, that, because of,
good point. Good point.
So I just want to make sure that people are aware that when we say safety, and I know we kind of maybe a little tangenty here, but because it's really important that people understand that in monogamy, that perceived sense of safety, that you don't have to go out and make new connections. You don't feel that sense of, I don't know,
risk.
That risk, right? Exactly. You don't feel that same sense of risk, right? I personally, I think I've only been on one date where I felt physically unsafe, and I've been on a lot of dates, right? So I can't speak to what that feels like every single time. Like but what I can do is I can make it so that when I am interacting with the people that I'm on the date with, that I'm doing everything I can to make sure they feel safe.
Right.
And that's a fine balance too, right? I want to show up authentically, and I want to make sure that the people I'm connecting with feel safe with me. Those two things are equally important. Yeah. Right.
Absolutely.
So anyway, we digress a little bit. Point is that exclusivity bit, right? That exclusivity bit and that perceived idea of safety and security goes out the window when you're in a non-monogamous relationship.
Yeah.
And I say non-monogamous and not consensually or ethically non-monogamous, because that's the truth. Even if you're doing it unethically or non-consensually, that safety bit still goes out the window. And some might say that if you're lying to yourself and to the people in your life about your monogamy, then maybe you're even putting them at more risk. Right? Absolutely. So I just consider that, right? Just when you're thinking about your life and the decisions that you're making and stuff, there's no judgment here. It's just a matter of taking a look at are you willing to step into that energy and start the grieving process of what you thought you were, as opposed to who you really are?
Yeah. I think that's a huge part of this, right? Like we can't sort of skip over identity grief. Like we had an identity, we had a feeling of status and belonging, right? And comfort, safety. And that identity of life partner, spouse, whatever the terminology
husband,
is.
wife, whatever. Yeah.
We attach to that. And grief over an identity is pretty significant and can be challenging to let go of, or to move through, not let go of. We don't really let go of grief. We we shift grief.
Yeah, we move through. Actually, a good example for those that are mono that are listening, a good example might be empty nest syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You're grieving the identity of being a parent full time.
Yeah.
Right. And so you're losing that. You're shifting into a different identity as an empty nester.
Mm-hmm.
You're still a parent. Like there's still that role, but
Yeah.
it's a different type of parenting now. It's a different type of relationship. And you and me, we can both speak to this intimately because we've experienced it. And so you're shifting into that different role, right? You're not a full-time parent anymore. And while a lot of us, or some of us, may have looked forward to that for quite some time, when it actually happens, it's definitely there is a grieving process that you need to go through, because you're grieving the identity of being a mom, or grieving the identity of being a father, and what that looks like. And then
rent if you don't have a gender assigned to you.
Exactly. Rent. I've never heard that before.
Yeah. There's 100 of them that people are coming up with now. So it's
that's great. Thank you for that. Yeah. So some sort of parent, because that identity has changed and shifted, and it's frankly changed and shifted through no fault of your own. It's just part of life. It's part of the process. It's one of the little deaths that we experience in life.
Yeah.
Right. And then we metamorphosize into something different, into something, we shift into something different. Yeah.
Well, and that's sort of that's what you're saying here is also helpful in terms of like, and I was saying shift and, metamorph, and all these terms we're bringing them up in mindful ways to keep us on track with both accepting reality and not spiraling into huge negativity around reality. Right. So the other piece about the exclusivity is the I'm not enough piece, right? That everybody, well, not everybody, but many people that I know have experienced. Lots of clients that I've spoken to and friends, the I'm not enough script runs hard, it runs fast, it runs 24/7. As soon as you're confronted with my formerly monogamous partner wants to see other people too.
There's something else interesting too in this. That idea of not being enough happens even in poly relationships when your partner has a new meta.
Yes.
Because it can happen. Because let's say, for instance, you and your partner, your nesting partner, however you identify them, you have another partner, but they don't currently, and they go for 6 months without having another partner. You develop a routine, you develop a structure, you develop a dynamic for that 6 months, even though it's not something necessarily that you want. It's just the way life goes. But then all of a sudden, that partner then has a new partner, right? And they're engaging in new relationship energy and all of the stuff that comes along with that. For me personally, I've dealt with grieving what I thought or hoped or whatever was going to be a much longer experience, because again, there's a safety in that, right? And then all of a sudden, I'm not enough.
The situation is that you were dating.
So nesting partner, two nesting partners.
Okay.
And then one of them has another partner.
Yeah.
But the other one does not.
Okay.
And so you go along that way for 6 months, 3 months, whatever it is. You develop a routine.
Right.
In that dynamic.
The comfort of regularity or whatever.
The comfort of regularity. And then all of a sudden, that partner who's not partnered currently finds another partner.
Disrupts the routine.
It disrupts the routine and it disrupts the comfort. Yeah. And part of the disruption is the grieving, the small, tiny death of what was for that 3 or 6 month time frame.
Right. So what you're talking about is about a hinge of a V.
Yeah.
The person at the hinge, the joining point.
Yep.
Suddenly no longer having the exclusivity of a partner over here on one arm who is monogamous to them.
Right. Exactly.
Even if it's just actively monogamous, not identifying as monogamous, right? So they're
exactly, or situationally monogamous, just because life circumstances and stuff. But the point is that I guess what I'm trying to say is that these little deaths happen often, and we don't often recognize them as they're happening. So that narrative of I'm not enough might not be happening for you right now because there's a level of security in there for you,
in your structure,
or safety, or exclusivity.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh
God.
Once that's gone.
Yeah.
Once that's gone, even if you've got another partner or two other partners, once that exclusivity bit is gone, that can shake your foundation a little bit.
I just have to add something, Kate. This just occurred to me. So we've talked, you and I, about polysaturation levels, right? Which is where you've got the maximum number of partners that you want or can manage reasonably. And then your partner might have a preference for your saturation level. So it might be like, I'm good with two partners. My partner is good with me having two partners. But as soon as I add a third one, my partner now is again in that sort of grief state of like, oh, wow, like I'm okay not being enough. I'm okay if you need another person, maybe two, but three, like it's like, holy Hannah. So the perceptions and the interpretations and the story that you attach to that information starts a grief cycle for you.
Yes.
Right.
Right.
So
exactly.
even these little adjustments that happen where it's, we're both polyamorous and functioning as polyamorous people, but the addition of new partners creates that. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yep.
So that Z suddenly becomes a Z, right?
Or whatever.
An N, right? And
N
so
or a P, or whatever it is, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. For sure.
Interesting.
So I think it's just really important to understand that this is an ongoing process.
Yes.
And that each time your relationship dynamic shifts, or your partner's relation, or one of your partner's relationships shift, there's a grieving process that somebody is going through.
Right.
Right. And I'm not saying this is true for everybody, because that's important to understand that not everybody experiences this. Some people don't, and that's fine. But we're talking to those that do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and the idea of intimacy, right? When I get into a bad headspace, I run a movie about what I imagine you're doing with someone else, right? It's very well lit, by the way.
Is it well acted at least?
Yeah, and I can see all the details.
All right.
So, and you talked to me about that at one point in our relationship when I was dating other people, remember? And and you said what you did was pull down the screen and let it snap up. Like, no, I don't want to watch that, right?
Yep.
That little snippet of what I imagine can hang on and replay and come up out of nowhere. Or if I'm feeling a little bit insecure or weak or tired or hungry, like, oh, it just, I still see the image, right? From that, even that moment that I saw before I snapped the screen up and went, no, I don't want to watch.
Yeah.
So yeah, when I'm overwhelmed or dealing with other stressors too, these little griefs happen more, right?
Exactly.
And they can hang on, they can be stretched out a little bit. So go ahead.
Yeah, for sure. What do you say we move on to the next one, which is mononormative programming?
Sure.
Specifically the messaging.
Talk to me. Tell me your
specifically
experience.
the messaging, right? So for those of us that grew up monogamous, right? And I think we're all subjected to the same level of programming. It's just how it lands for you, or maybe not. I don't know. Anyway, so the mononormative programming that says that true love looks like this: man and woman, or partner and partner, and that's it, right? Releasing that fairy tale, releasing that idea that that's the perfection of relationship, right? So, and they lived happily ever after. Yeah. And it's always seen to be a dyad. Yeah. So two people.
Yeah. It's problematic, when there's lack of representation for any group. And, even the stories that we do see often end badly for people, where there's been a triad, or there's been somebody who gives their blessing to their partner to go have other partners. It seems like often in whatever representation we do have, it's not great messaging either. So we're not really getting.
I've seen a couple.
Have you?
Yeah. There's nothing comes to mind now, of course, now that I've said it. But yeah, there's been a few recently that have come up that have been good examples of how poly and non-monogamy can work. Mm-hmm. But yeah, anyway, you're right. The majority of the programs that deal with that in a very kind of almost, I won't say vilify it, they definitely make it sound like it's not something that you want to strive to be.
Right. And we get the opposite messaging about monogamy, right?
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
I have the radio on in my car sometimes. I don't know how many diamond commercials I hear. Like, it's all about
give your true love, the diamond that she'll love.
Oh my God, from February to June. Like,
so, and then in my head, I'm like, which one?
Yeah, right? Who do I propose to?
Right.
So yeah, and along with that comes the piece of status. So that feeling of having the status of being the only one. Mm-hmm. Right. Yep. We identify with that. We really love that sometimes. And so when even if we're okay with our partner doing this, and we want it for ourselves, right? I married you before we opened up again. You know that, right? You noticed. Did you see what I was doing there? I was vying for status, right? And we talked about that with Jessica Fern in a previous episode about how relationship structure, if we're too dependent on that, we're not secure enough in ourselves. That was me.
Right. Absolutely.
I absolutely needed a ring on your finger. And I wasn't kidding about that. A ring on your finger, because you were like, I don't really wear rings. But now you are. So, it gives me that little tingle of now he's wearing a ring for me. I won. Got a point, right? Like it does bring up that sense of I'm losing something. Even as a wife, I don't get to retain all that means in what we consider our normal society's view of wife, right?
Right. So you're grieving the monopoly of your partner's time, energy, and resources as well.
Yeah.
In that situation.
Oh God.
Too.
Well, that's a whole other beast.
Right.
There was a time when we were very on a schedule. Like you said, we were comfortable in our schedule, and things got very shaken up as we opened up. As more people came into our world, we had to divvy up time, and we had to look at how much energy do we have for this particular activity after this one, right? So we're not going to plan back-to-back date nights necessarily. Like, also we're in our 50s, so bedtime is 10:30, so maybe 11:30 on a late night. So energy is a problem. I'm recovering from post-concussion syndrome. I still have to nap every afternoon. Who does that unless they're sick or, right? Like me, I do, because my brain is injured, and that has to be part of my schedule, and I can't compromise on that,
Right.
So, but something has to give in the schedule, and it's going to be from the time that you and I spend together as nesting partners, right?
Right. And also the time that you spend with yourself.
Oh, that's the worst. We totally take it away. It's what time, right? Like you just get to the point where you're like, okay, gotta go. Oh, okay, gotta go. Oh, I gotta go.
I mean, if you're not careful, you can certainly get to that point. For me personally, my experience is that I need that time to myself, and so I make it a priority.
Everybody does, though. That's the thing. Even if you're not an introvert, you still need that time to recharge, to tend to your relationship with yourself.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. So grieving the fact that we don't, like in a dyad, like in a traditional dyad marriage or relationship, you've got the two people and then you may have friends and stuff, but you still, it's more socially acceptable to find that time for yourself with friends, like I think there's definitely a shift there that happens for sure.
Well, even in those cases, other than, the very gendered boys' night out or girls' night out, right? We also have a feeling of entitlement to belonging, right? Like we're going to make friends together. We're going to meet each other's friends, which isn't always the case for other partners, right?
Right. Depending upon how you practice poly, yeah.
Right. And so even coming into a relationship as a poly person with another poly person, you are very well aware of a shared schedule and probably some friends that you may not meet if you're practicing parallel poly at all, right? I think that's maybe why people are drawn to kitchen table poly. It seems easier, but I'm just going to say we'll do a podcast on it. There's a lot of complexities that go along with that as well.
For sure.
But, you do have to be mindful of, I don't have a monopoly on their extra time. And that's actually a really healthy place to be in, I think, for anyone in any relationship. We shouldn't feel like just because we're in a relationship, we get all of your extra time.
Right.
Right.
Exactly. And just because somebody's not doing something doesn't mean that they're obligated to do something with you.
Right. Right. Downtime is real and it's necessary and it's part of our relationships with ourselves. So
it's so real for me.
I know. It was a steep learning curve coming into this relationship for me, because you really do need that. And I think we got very, very good at it through COVID, because we were in each other's faces all the time. Right. So, but that's where it really galvanized for me that this is great time, Yeah, exactly. And that became my time, which was really helpful for my relationship with myself.
And some might say that it gave you permission to show up for yourself that way.
100%.
Right.
I would say that.
Okay, cool. What's next?
Well, the socially accepted part of monogamy is really appealing. It's appealing to me, and I identify as ambiamorous, so I can be comfortable in a monogamous relationship or a polyamorous relationship to a degree. But for me, it also means that I'm uncomfortable in any relationship because there's something that I want that I'm not getting. So I'm pretty well aware of my mononormative programming and what I value about monogamy. And for me, one of the things that became very important in my life and is less so now, but was very important, was being seen as normal, socially acceptable, sort of in that ideal that is common or well established, right? There's a comfort in that. And when you're on the fringe of that normalcy and you're not that anymore, there's a discomfort that comes with that for some people. For me, for sure.
It's interesting because I feel the exact opposite of that. I feel right? Like being on the fringe makes me happier. I don't think I've ever grieved the idea of this part of the socially accepted bit of monogamy.
Yeah.
I kind of like being the outlier.
I think you also enjoyed parts of yourself, including like being a musician, all kinds of parts that were a bit different, to have, that sense of I'm not a conformist,
Right. I mean, just everything down to the way I look and present, right? Like I'm 53 years old and I still have fucking earrings. Like, come on, grow up, Greg. Like
I love the earrings. Don't grow up.
Me too. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying I love them as well.
Yeah.
But they're definitely part of that sort of outlier image. right? That I don't want to fit in. I don't want to conform.
Yeah.
And non-monogamy is another one of those non-conforming things for me.
Yeah.
Though I will say that even at the beginning of my journey, I still grieved that. I still grieved the idea that people were calling me, just a cheater. Like it was just a way for me to cheat and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so it became pretty laborious. Is that the word? Laborious?
Sure. Laborious. Yeah.
Laborious to try to explain to people that that's not what it's about. And I guess that's part of the reason we do the work that we do now, is because we're trying to tell people that it isn't that, and that is a misperception, a misconception of what consensual non-monogamy is all about. Mm-hmm. And I used to get called a player all the time, or some people would say, well, you're not really interested in deep emotional commitments. And I'm like, yeah, that's true. At the time, I wasn't. I thought I was, but I wasn't, because I was using poly as a way to actually distance myself from that intimacy until I was able to do the work. But even then, there was still that bit about grieving, not being able to fit in, right? Yeah. Even though I don't want to fit in, even though I go out of my way oftentimes to not fit in, I still wanted to fit in.
Right. Well, a sense of belonging is actually really fundamental to most human beings, because, evolutionarily, we would not have survived without a tribe, right? Mm-hmm. Or a group to belong to, that were looking out for us and helping us survive. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, yeah, interesting, hey?
Right. And monogamy is...
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you.
I was going to say monogamy is easier for people to understand.
It totally is. When you go, I'm always conflicted about how to navigate the outside world in regard to being seen with another partner, right? We're a very well-known couple. We have a lot of people in the city that we'll run into from time to time. And so,
more so you than me, but yeah.
Well, you're known as Mr. Million, Leon Million's husbands, right?
In certain communities, that's certainly true.
So, but the thing is that I've always been kind of conflicted about, do I use just their name? Do I say this is my boyfriend, my partner, my lover? Do I need a definition? Maybe I'll just stick with the name. I'm kind of always all over the map. Whereas when I'm out with you, this is my husband, Greg. It's very simple, right? I don't have to worry about perception.
So what are you grieving in that situation?
Simplicity, predictability, comfort.
So you're grieving the comfort that you thought you would always have.
Yeah. I think it's just that I get stressed out. I get anxious. I fear criticism. I have received criticism, right? As a poly person, many times in my life, since I started in my 20s, my first marriage, people said very, very harsh things about that decision to open up, even though in my first marriage, it wasn't even my offering. I didn't bring it to the table. My husband did. But the thing is that people perceived it as very negative, because we were this, idyllic couple that people rallied around and went to the wedding of and were happy for. And then they hear this. Oh my gosh, how could we do this to them?
Right.
Isn't it weird? It's like this kind of, you're doing it to me, even though I'm not in the relationship thing that happens with society.
It is very weird. Yeah. So I was just interested to find out what you were grieving in that situation, because I think it really is the comfort and the comfortability, if that's a word. I don't know if it is.
I think that's a word. Yeah. I don't love, the idea of being anxiously worrying about perceptions or about acceptance or about simplicity, or, I always thought that relationship escalator was going to get me to that state of contentment and bliss and ease. And I'll be honest, this life that we have entered into mindfully and intentionally is not easy. It is not easy.
No, it's not.
It opens us up to all kinds of heartbreak and constant releases or reframing or redefining or questioning with other people, and even within our own marriage, right? Yep. So I'm losing ease and comfort. Yeah.
Right. Interesting. Yeah.
I never really thought about that till now.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. There's no doubt about it. It's a lot of work.
The scheduling alone.
Yeah, it's just this. Yeah, how did people do it before Google Calendars?
I don't know. It's ridiculous.
Boy, I was one of the people that did it before Google Calendars. It wasn't easy. Lots of. Oh wait, I thought you were anyway. Which still happens, weirdly enough. So I think the other one too is the loss of status. Why be married if it doesn't mean anything? I remember going on a date with somebody and they asked me, so if you're poly, why did you get married?
Yeah.
Right.
I wrote a blog piece about that. Go check it out at leannemillion.com because of this question. Go ahead.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not going to answer the question from my own perspective because that's not what this is about. But the point is that's a perception that people have is why get married? So the grief there, the grieving part is the part of, that loss of status. Like the marriage doesn't mean anything to anybody else but you and I, or the people in the marriage.
Well, and the perception is, I think the marriage doesn't mean anything at all.
Right. That's what I mean. It doesn't mean anything to other people.
Yeah.
But it means something to us still.
But I don't even know that they wrap their heads around that. I think that's why they're asking the question. Like,
right.
What's the point of being married if you're not going to be faithful? I don't understand that. Why would you bother?
Well, don't get me started on the word faithful. Don't get me started on the word faithful.
I know.
That's a whole other opera.
That's the kind of conversations that we're having, right? And it's not easy sometimes to kind of feel that you can explain it sufficiently or want to even.
Yeah, I think I've reached the point where I just don't really give a fuck. I don't explain it anymore. I'm just like, it's my life. It's the choices and decisions that I've made. And I'm happy to have an intelligent conversation with you that doesn't revolve around judgment.
Right.
I mean, if you want to be curious, that's different, but being judgy is not okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think I've reached that point. And even that process was a grieving the idea that I needed to give a shit about what people thought of me.
Right. Yeah. And I'm stepping more and more into that as I experience our relationship. Right.
Well, not just our relationship, but all relationships.
No, I mean, since we've begun this journey, which came in conjunction with our relationship beginning, because I was monogamous before that.
I see. Okay.
For a long time, and polyamorous before that, and then monogamous before that, and then polyamorous before that. But whatever. It's been a bit of a ride. In this version, Leanne 97.0, it has been a very interesting sort of reflection as I'm moving through it. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Good.
I want to talk about, we were talking about comfort earlier in terms of predictability, and we were talking about comfort even before that in terms of safety. This is about being able to relax, about your appearance, about your relationship, about your communication. When you're in a long-term relationship, there's a sense of comfort that comes with kind of complacency. Maybe that's not the right word, but it's that sense of, I don't really have to work at this anymore. Who am I going to impress? It's okay. Right. I can just show up how I show up. Now, there is some freedom in that, and that's great. And also there's some slippery slopes in there where we stop working on ourselves. We stop working on the relationship. We stop investing in ourselves. We stop investing in the relationship. We just take it for granted that it's always going to be there, and we don't try anymore.
Right.
Right.
And so you're in a mono relationship, and you're in that space of complacency where you've intentionally or unintentionally just sort of stopped doing the growth bit that relationships require, your partner comes to you and says, hey, guess what? I'm poly. Yeah, you're grieving what you thought was going to be this complacency. You're grieving what you thought was this level of comfort and acceptance and understanding that your partner had of who you were. And now we circle back into all of the other things that we just talked about. Mm-hmm. The narrative about not being enough and all of this other stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think it's really important to understand that even though we're doing this in list style, these are all interconnected.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
They all happened almost simultaneously. Mm-hmm. And that's what can make it oftentimes overwhelming for people is, you're losing friends, you're losing family members, or you feel like you're losing these people anyway, and these relationships, all of this shifting and changing. It's like tectonic plates are just, just like nothing feels secure. Nothing feels solid. Yeah. During those times. And a big reason for that is because of this idea of grieving, because you thought something was going to be a certain way for the rest of your life. And now all of a sudden it's not. Just like when my brother died, I thought my brother was always going to be there for me.
Right.
And then all of a sudden he wasn't.
Yeah.
And I actually get goosebumps when I say that, because it's a very similar experience.
Yep. Even
if you're the one that wants to be poly,
mm-hmm.
you're still grieving all of those things that you thought were going to be.
Mm-hmm. And
once you realize, holy fuck, I'm poly.
That can be such a weird experience, because you're almost in constant conflict, right? I want to need this and I'm grieving, and I want to need this and I'm grieving, right? Mm-hmm. So when we're choosing, or we identify as poly and we step into that, sometimes other people, even a monogamous partner, they don't understand that conflict is real. Mm-hmm. And it can feel overwhelming and debilitating and put us into fight, flee. What is it?
Yeah, the F's.
Flight,
all the F's.
Fight, freeze, or fawn. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Right? It can put us into our sort of reptilian survivalist kind of thinking. Shut us down. It can do all kinds of weird emotional stuff as we're grappling mm-hmm. with those two things.
Right.
And I guess for me personally, what I came to is a place of, that acceptance of the holding space for both at the same time.
Right.
And that it's okay to sort of almost toggle between being excited about polyamory and grieving monogamy, right?
If that's your experience. If that's not your experience, that's fine too. But again, just to reiterate, we're speaking about and to those people who have experienced something similar in this, and letting you know that it's okay to be able to. In fact, I would go a step further and say that it's perfectly healthy.
Yeah.
To hold both of those things as being true.
Yeah.
Right? Because in the case of us, I mean, I didn't drag you kicking and screaming into poly, but I was certainly the driver of that for a short period of time, right? Yeah. Because of some decisions and some unconscious behaviors and stuff that I had. Yep. And so even though I was the driver of it, I still struggled with the idea that I still had to grieve what I thought was going to be my monogamous marriage to you. I was done with all of that. Mm-hmm. And guess what? I wasn't done with any of it, right? Mm-hmm. I had just put it down for a little while, right?
Right. And it's important, I think, for us to acknowledge our grief, move through it, sit with it, journal about it, listen to some sad monogamous songs, whatever we need to do to help ourselves see it and spend time with it, rather than shelving it, sitting on it, repressing it, because then it comes out in little sort of sharp ways, like we're poking at our partner, or we're abusing ourselves, or
guilt,
we
shame.
Start overeating, over indulging in whatever substances, we're disconnecting, or we're protecting, because we're not dealing with the grief. We're not saying, hi, grief, I see you, you're part of me and this experience, right?
Right. Right. We're self-soothing in harmful ways. Yeah. I'm reminded of the death card in a tarot deck. And I remember the first time I ever saw the death card come up in a tarot deck. This was years and years and years ago, before poly, before any of that. And I remember thinking to myself, oh, fuck, I'm dead. But the way it was explained to me is that the death card can actually be a good thing, because for any new beginning to happen, you must have a death. Something must die. And from the ashes of that death comes these new beginnings. And I've held on to that reframe of death for since then, for so long. And I think ultimately that's what we're talking about here, is honoring the death bit, honoring the grief, honoring the emotions and the feelings that come up when something that you thought was going to be a certain way is no longer that way.
Right.
And again, it doesn't matter if you're the person that's instigated it or initiated it rather, or if you're the person that is sort of being swept up in it, because this is something that you feel like you have to do in order to stay with your partner, or whatever your narrative is around that. Right.
I hope it's not that.
Well, but sometimes it is.
I know. And if that's the case, reach out. We'll help you.
Yeah, for sure. We're here to help. And reach out. We'll help you with any of this, because we've been through it personally. We have tools that we can use to help you process and work through these emotions, and really, really start to acknowledge and accept them for what they are and the purpose that they serve. Because this grieving process serves a purpose. You cannot have these new beginnings without these small deaths.
Right.
So I kind of wish I would have said that at the top. But
well, and
anyway.
Grief is part of life. We have a life cycle. We have a death cycle in all elements around us. It's intrinsic to our human nature, but we are so uncomfortable about it. We don't know much about how to communicate about it. Right. So if you're struggling, I think the idea is to say out loud to your loved ones, I'm grieving some stuff,
Yeah.
I might need some time. I might need to do something nice for myself. That's healthy.
Yeah. Go shopping.
No, retail therapy is also a substance.
Can be.
Do a little, not a lot.
Go buy one record instead of 10,
Right.
Anyway, exactly. So the next one actually kind of goes with the loss of status, in my opinion, the loss of territory. Right? The space and things that you're sharing with metas occurs. It doesn't matter if you're in a KTP or a communal situation, or in a parallel situation, or and even in a solo poly situation, I guess too, you can still have this experience, right?
Okay, wait, stop there. We're going to have to catch some people up with some terminology, maybe. So a meta is a partner it is your partner's partner. So it is someone that you're connected to through someone else, but you may not have a direct connection. Or you may. So that's your meta. And then parallel poly, we mentioned it before, is when you are dating separately, but you are a couple, but you have your own partners that don't meet or don't interact or minimally interact. And then kitchen table poly is where everybody's friendly enough to sit around the kitchen table and have dinner together, for example, maybe on a fairly regular basis, maybe even all the time. Maybe you live together. So that's kitchen table. And then there was one more after that. Do you remember? Oh gosh.
I said communal, but that's KTP.
Yeah, no, I can't remember, but I'll see it in the Solo? Replay. Solo, that was it. Solo poly. So solo poly is where you are on your own as an individual. You're not part of a couple, and you're polyamorous. So just catching people.
It's also important to understand that you can be solo poly and be married.
Right.
You can be solo poly if you're married to a monogamous partner. And your monogamous partner wants nothing to do with poly, isn't interested in it, and they want to stay monogamous, then technically you can be solo poly. Right. So and please, and if anybody hears this and wants to correct me, please feel free to. These terms
terminology.
are here. It's challenging, but anyway, that's my understanding of that's our understanding rather of what those terms mean. So what I want to say is that, sharing your space, your things, events, restaurants, things that you thought were yours,
your territory,
your territory, right? Yeah. It's literally a loss of territory. What, you took them to that restaurant? That was our restaurant.
Right.
Yeah. That's a little death that happens.
Yeah.
Right. It's a little tiny death that happens because, again, you are mourning the thought of what you thought was always going to be. You're mourning the process or the idea that something was always going to be a certain way.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's ultimately what this comes down to. And your space, your things, your car, for instance, right? You and I had a conversation recently about this. Some people
are okay sharing cars and some people are not, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's just really a question of, shared space, bedrooms, stuff of life, kitchen stuff, right? All that kind of stuff, right? That invasion feeling that happens sometimes with people, where it's like this, I wasn't home and somebody was going through my kitchen drawers. I remember I had a client tell me that once, that they felt like their space was invaded by this person that they had very little information about, and it really freaked them out.
Right.
And so we started by looking at the grief process. You're grieving the loss of that personal space for you.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and a sense of, again, there's that predictability, right? Like, I can predict that everything's going to be in that kitchen drawer the same way I put it there when I come back, unless it's been my partner who had.
And imagine you're surprised when it's not. It's like, what the fuck?
Yeah. Right.
Where's honey? Where the tongs? Like,
Did you put the tongs, honey?
I didn't move the tongs. Did you do something weird with the tongs, honey?
Right.
Did you clean them afterwards at least?
And some people come to agreements around those things. They put those in their relationship agreements. Like a popular one is like, we won't have other partners in our bed, right? So we have a bed that is our bed.
All right. We won't use tongs with other partners. Right. Got it.
Yeah. Don't. Oh, that's a whole other episode, honey. The next one is the legal and societal support. So, we can get married, but we can't marry another person now.
Right.
That's illegal.
Yeah, and you've got some clients that are going through something like this too.
Well, and in this particular situation, it's a triad situation, and the idea that a legal sort of structure would serve a purpose to help the person who's newer to the group feel more comfortable makes total sense, especially to me. As you know, I'm very high on the relationship structure reliance. We just covered that. So I understand that, that desire to be recognized and get that status. So,
right. I think it's important too. You mentioned that the newer person, maybe there are 3 people that are connecting together simultaneously, but at some point, those 3 people are going to have to make a decision if they want to be legal about it.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the 3 is not going to be able to marry the other 2.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not going to happen. Right. And so that's something to consider. Right. And even common law doesn't like, we have common law here in Canada, and it doesn't include that either.
No.
Right. So
it does open it up.
Squatters' rights, maybe, but not common law.
Yeah. And, it does open it up for people who are in, any other kind of relationship other than the heterosexual, relationship.
Yep.
So that's nice. There's been some changes, but we're just not even there yet. And then there's other pieces, like if we have kids together, people might want to be adopting those children, but there are roadblocks because they already have 2 legal parents that can't be adopted. That kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
And you actually mentioned in here child custody, work issues, like those are all sort of part of that societal structure thing, right?
Right. Like, can I
take to the Christmas party for, the company Christmas party? who do you take to the company picnics? Like, how do you explain that you're taking 2 or 3 or 10 people to these events, right? And frankly, in most cases, my understanding is you don't do that. You take whoever would be considered your nesting partner in that situation.
Especially if you fear loss of job because of your relationship structure.
Right. And they already know that you're married, and now you've got this poly bit to tack on to that. Right. If you're in fear of your job, losing your job because of it, again, there's that grief. And that grief is actually kind of compounded now, because now you're grieving the fact that you can't be as public about it as you might want to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's like we said earlier, this is all interconnected. Like, it's not all just one thing, even though we're listing it out. I think we're sort of pulling on the thread to see what we can discover here. And maybe there's stuff in here that we haven't discovered or haven't talked about so far. We've got a few other points to cover, but if there is other experiences out there that you've had around grieving what you thought was always going to be a certain way, whether you're the initiator or not, please feel free to comment, to reach out, or let us know, or whatever.
Yeah.
So we would love to hear your personal experiences around this.
Yeah. Would love that feedback.
This next one I really like, because this next one is kind of a real motivator for me in the work that we do. Right? This idea of stepping off the relationship escalator and going, okay, so now I'm poly, or I'm CNM in some form, consensually non-monogamous in some form. So now what the fuck do I do? I mean, I don't know. There's no, because it is so, it's so much of an outlier status, there's not a whole lot of information that's readily available.
Well, there are some good books,
Yeah. Well, definitely, but it's not like you can just. Yeah, but it's not like you see it everywhere, like you do with mono relationships, right? So you do have to do some searching. And then the other questions, the curiosity that you get is, what do I want or need from these relationships if it's not about the typical next steps, right? And those are important, right? Because maybe those typical next steps aren't going to serve you any longer, but what does serve you?
Right.
Right? Just because you know what doesn't serve you doesn't necessarily mean that you have clarity around what does serve you. And shameless plug, we can help you with that.
Yeah.
In fact, that's the primary focus of the work that we do, is helping people understand what serves them and how they can show up and be their most authentic self and be empowered in their connections, not only with other people, but with themselves.
Right.
So that's sort of the crux, the foundation of the work that we do. Right. So, and that's maybe why I love this one so much, but I also love it because I've struggled with this myself. I'm like, I'm poly. Now what do I do? Do I go out and fuck everything that moves, or what happens? What do I want? How do I want to do this? I don't know. And frankly, making mistakes happens. Making quote unquote mistakes and finding your way through is, and maybe I'm going to get a shit ton of backlash for this, but it's okay. Because it's how we learn.
Yeah.
You can't expect somebody who's never experienced this and who is grieving the loss of what they thought would be the rest of their life to get it right all the fucking time. You just can't.
Yeah.
And to ask that of an individual is unreasonable, in my opinion. And frankly, it's irresponsible because it doesn't allow for the humanness of the experience.
Yeah. Yeah, and it can be hard when
feelings about this.
I think you do. It can be hard when you're grieving too, right? To see someone else and recognize that they're grieving. So it's good to talk about it, to say, I'm grieving. Are you? Like, what are the things you're grieving? These are the things I'm grieving. Have that discussion so that it's on the table and you're more aware, so that you can help each other through it as compassionate partners to one another. You don't have to dismiss each other's feelings as non-existent because you don't know about them. If you're talking about them, you get that information,
Yeah. Good point.
Yeah.
You want to handle the next one?
Yeah. So the vision of the future. So vision of the future. I'm grieving the vision of, you were just talking about that, what you thought was going to be the rest of your life. But it starts for many people quite young. I think for me, it started around 4, right? As soon as I went to a wedding, I was like, goal.
Mhm.
And I accomplished that 4 times, by the way. Thank you very much.
Overachiever. Yay.
Type A personality. I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it many times over. So
yeah, marriage is like a golf score. I think the lower it is, the more
you have 4-2. What you talking about?
Yeah, I do, which is why I don't golf. Fuck that game. Anyway, yeah.
So when you're thinking about that vision, it isn't just a vision that you had this week, this year, this decade. Sometimes it's a vision that you've held on to for a very long time, and you've seen yourself in it, and you've made up stories about it, you've attached to it. So it can be a really hard detaching that has to take place there as you're grieving it, and like we went through a little bit of that when we were talking about, hey, we're always going to be on the rocking porch together, which is our joke because we got it wrong when we were trying to say rocking chair on the porch. We said rocking porch. Anyway, so that's our little thing, right? We're going to do that with each other. We're going to grow old together and be on the porch in our rocking chairs. And then we opened up. And for a while we were hierarchical. So that was still there. That vision never wavered. It was still there. And then feelings were developed for other people. Questions started to pop up, and it became, how big is that porch? Can I have another chair over on the other side of me?
Yeah.
Is that okay? Can we do that?
Right.
So it shifted the picture, right? So it's still there. It's just a bigger porch with more chairs.
Right.
Possibly.
Right.
Right.
And that's something else too to understand is that you mentioned that, when you were 4 years old, you went to your first wedding and you were like, life goals, #life goals. I think from my personal experience, I was taught that part of being a man meant providing for your family. Right. And that was a very mononormative way of looking at things, right? You get married, you have 2.5 children, and you move into a house with the white picket fence and the perfect yard and the perfect job and the keeping up with the Joneses bit and all of that stuff. And while it never really resonated with me, I still wanted it because I thought that's what everybody wanted of me. And so I had to grieve this idea that that's what everybody, not everybody, but most of society looks at as what is a good man, right? A good man does this, this, and this, right?
Success,
exactly. Right. And so that's what success looks like, right? And for me, that's not what success ever looked like for me, ever. And so I had to grieve that loss of status, going back to what we talked about earlier. But like you with the wedding, it was me watching, shows when I was a little kid about successful, businessmen or scientists or superheroes or whatever it was, right? And they, finding the love of their life and living happily ever after and being a man providing for them, right? And all of this other stuff. And what I come to find out is what I actually want is I want partners who are able to provide for themselves.
Right.
Right. And not ask that of me.
Right. And
so I had to grieve that process of that. Does that make me less of a man because I don't want to provide for my partners? But yet I need to, so like just from a male perspective, from my personal male perspective, maybe there's some of that happening for you, whoever's listening, or somebody that maybe you're one of your partners or whatever might be going through something similar right now. And metamorphosizing into a different identity of what it means to be a man. Right. And so you're losing, you've got that vision of the future of what you thought was going to be. And that has to change now.
Yeah.
Whether you like it or not, it has to change. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And, you know, there's a lot of things that support that in our mononormative programming. And when we talk about that, we're talking about everything from the films we watch, the conversations we have over coffee or over here in the street or see on television or hear
Music.
Our music lyrics, right?
I mean, music is just full of it. I mean, just like everywhere in every song. So much so that I've tried to build a poly list a couple of times, poly playlist for music, and it's so hard to do. Because even the songs that start out sounding like they're poly turn out to be about cheating. And I'm like, fuck.
I know. Or like I have a poly CNM list because there's still sort of that music genre that really embraces the sexual aspect, the sexual connection without commitment necessarily, right? So I got kind of a mix, but it's really hard to find those poly friendly songs. And a lot of them are fairly generic, you know? Like one of my favorites is just about freedom. Like I'm pretty sure it wasn't written for me in this situation, but it applies. And so
it does.
It does. So I listen to that as part of my list.
Is that the Independent with You song?
Yes. No. There's another one. Don't be afraid of your freedom. I can't remember. I'll put it in the notes.
Yeah. Anyway, so but it's everywhere, I think, is the point, right? And so this, and it all goes to creating that vision of what we thought the future was going to be based upon that mononormative programming. Yeah. And then once you discover that you're poly, you're like, oh fuck, now what? Now what do I do? Now where do I look for that? I have to find a different community of people in order to be able to feel that same level of communal comfort, right?
Right. We just went for coffee with somebody who said, I don't have anybody in my life who understands this life that I want to lead. I need to talk to you, you know? It's like, I get it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. Cool.
So the last one is loss of ability to focus on one person. So you have to now consider the needs of your meta and your other partners. And that can be everything from time, energy, and resources to feelings and emotional reactions about decisions that you're wanting to make, right? And we talk a lot about being a compassionate partner because it's a value that we both share. And we are not of the mind, you know, that we can do whatever we want to do in whatever manner without concern for others, right? So that's our approach to our relationships. And that's what I encourage with my clients. I find if we're not compassionate with others, we tend to find other people that aren't compassionate to us. So it kind of comes around, you know? So I personally value the ability to have focus, which means for me, my polysaturation point is pretty low. It's pretty low, I think. You know, like I like to have maybe an online relationship and a local relationship and a relationship with you. And that's it, you know, because I'm at that point, I'm taxed. I might have more love to give, but I don't have necessarily the opportunity or the time, energy, and resources. Right. So, yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Or even the bandwidth to consider other people's feelings, needs.
Right. Yeah. Because there's still that relationship with yourself in there.
Oh, yeah. That's right. No, you're right. That's true.
Yeah.
Because we always have to like consider our metabolic capacity, you know, even on an emotional and energetic level. What is our capacity?
Right.
Yeah.
For sure.
So self-care, what should we do? We're in grief. What should we do?
Oh, wow. Okay. Honor it, acknowledge it. Don't try to ignore it. And how can you honor and acknowledge it? Well, I think first thing you could do is when you feel those feelings come up, the sadness around losing what you thought was going to be, I think talking about it is a really good way to process it and to honor it. So speaking about it to the people that matter, that need to know about it, because it does impact how you show up in those relationships. And the people around you might not always be aware of that.
Especially if they're going through the same thing. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Communication. I mean, things like journaling those are always great tools. Journaling is always a great tool for self-care.
Recording, if you're not a great writer, if you don't love to write.
Right. Yeah. I think most of us now have cell phones that we can record on. So yeah, absolutely. Or get yourself a tape recorder or whatever. I think simple things like taking time for yourself, making sure that you carve out time for you, whether that means that you're, and it's not just like sort of numb out, space out time. It's intentional time, right? To do the things that you enjoy doing by yourself, whether that's exercise, whether that's maybe listening to some music, intentionally listening to certain songs that would create a shift in your energy. While also, you could also, put together a grieving playlist, so that you can sit with those feelings, right?
Yeah.
Music is a huge tool for me in my life in processing stuff. As you would know if you were following me on Spotify by all the playlists that I have. I think that's what comes up to the top. I'm sure I'm missing some stuff. Any other ideas?
Connecting with nature.
Yeah.
Animals. If you have access to animals, they have cat cafes now if you're not allergic.
Speaking of which, Max's little paw is making an appearance there in the corner.
Yes.
His head was making an appearance earlier.
Yeah.
Max is, for those listening, Max is one of our dogs. Sorry.
Yes.
I like how I looked off camera and like just went like I'm talking to nothing. Talking to like the blank, no-faced audience. That's weird.
That was weird. You just turned to the audience, but there isn't one.
No. But there is one. But there is one.
But there is one. Yes.
Just not yet.
Not in this moment.
Whoa. That's a whole, wow. I'm going to have a headache on that one. Anyway.
So I would say, once you've sat with it and expressed it, then it's time to use your body, because the body is a natural processing machine. It does its job if we let it. And we are the most stagnant that we've ever been in our lives physically. So, like dogs will shake off an encounter with a scary animal. They'll just literally shake themselves to change the energy, right? So we need to do the same thing. So dance, walk, swim,
shake.
What?
Shake.
Yeah. Do embodiment practices, work out, bike, do whatever you can do to get the blood pumping and your limbs moving, even if it's just for 10 minutes, because that 10 minutes shifts so much in your body that you're not even aware of physiologically, mentally, and emotionally. So do the thing, like say, okay, I'm in grief now. I'm going to sit with it. I'm going to listen to the songs. I'm going to have the hot bath. I'm going to, get a nice massage, do the things that are comforting, eat the nice soup, whatever the comforting thing is, I'm going to avoid the overindulgence in liquor, drugs, sex, shopping, gambling, social media. I'm going to really try to tend to myself in a healthy way and get moving. And then I would say re-engage with your life to help stop any kind of hyper focus that you might have on your grief. Right? So we need to do the process and then we need to release. Right. So it's like,
we don't want to live in it.
And it's continual. It's this kind of like, I'm in it, I release. Okay, I'm with it, and I'm releasing, right?
Each time you do it, your window of tolerance gets a little bit bigger. So you're able to handle it easier. You're less reactive to it. It doesn't feel as overwhelming, those types of things. Yeah. You had also mentioned tapping at some point, not here today, but also as one of the other self-care things that you can do. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
You know what I'm going to say? I'm going to say that we're going to create a course called Shift Your Script. And that will be taught in that course. So Stay tuned. As soon as it's up and running, we'll be talking about it on the podcast and letting people know where they can find it, and putting it up in our Facebook group, Empowered Poly, Relationship Support and Advice. So if you would like to join our Facebook group and stay in the know, you can do that. But yeah, definitely, it's not going to be only about tapping. It's going to be about a series of things that you can do for yourself, as well as the nature of emotions and how to understand them, and using your own self to shift out of that negative spiral by taking responsibility for what's yours to own. Yeah.
And that shift your script course will also work with grief. It will help you to understand grieving. It'll help you to understand your role in the grief process and how you got there, and then how you can shift it and reframe it and process through it. So it works for anything, really.
It's a very powerful course, actually. We're almost done. So
we're almost done. We're excited to get it out there to the world. So
it'll be out soon.
Cool. So do we feel like this is a good place to leave this?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. So I do want to say one other thing sort of in closing, and it's a bit of a repeat of what I said earlier, but one of the things that I would hope that the people that are listening to this will understand is that it's okay to have these feelings. And it's okay to not want those feelings. And it's okay to express and vocalize and get them out of you, as opposed to trying to continue to stuff them down because you're afraid you're going to be a burden to somebody, or because you don't know how, or because you're afraid you're going to make an ass of yourself, or whatever the fear of not expressing those are. Please know that it is okay to do it in a healthy and effective way. That doesn't include lashing out. That doesn't include, being violent or being dismissive or disrespectful to the people around you. But what it can include is honesty and authenticity, and being honest with how you feel, right?
And in the receiving of this information, as well as the other person, to create that safe space for your partner to be able to do this work.
Right. Because it's not about you.
Yeah.
Even if you're the one that feels like you're responsible for it, because you're the one that wants to be poly and your partner doesn't, it's still not about you. You're still entitled as a person who's shifting into a poly relationship or a poly identity. You're entitled to have that experience just as much as the person that wants to stay mono is entitled to have that experience.
Right.
And neither one of those experiences have anything to do with each other. They can be separate while you're still connected.
Right. And that's going to be our next episode. Oh,
there you go.
The mono
nice segue.
Relationship. Yep.
Yeah. I'm doing a little bit of a dance for those of you that are listening and can't see, and you're probably better off not being able to see the little dance. But anyway, okay. And remember, choose love
and keep it kind.
We'd love to hear your comments, questions, or topic suggestions, and don't forget to subscribe.
And you're invited to join our Facebook group, Empowered Poly, Relationship Support and Advice.
You can reach out to us on our websites at gregmillion.com
and at leannemillion.com,
or follow us on Instagram at @thegregmillion
and at leannemillion.